Professional athletes 150 years ago often had distinctive hair. Here are the Cincinnati Red Stockings, the first all-professional baseball team in 1869. You can see an assortment of mustaches and sideburns. But then whiskers left the game around 1900 and did not return until 1972. So what happened? Let's talk about hair's history in Major League Baseball. At the time of the American Civil War, influential men set the tone with their grooming habits. President Abraham Lincoln sported a chin strap. Union General Ambrose Burnside grew hair from his ears to his mustache, a style which got dubbed sideburns. And abolitionist Frederick Douglass had a neatly trimmed beard like many other mature men in the Western world. Facial hair was dignified and fashionable. Even Charles Darwin theorized about beards serving an evolutionary purpose in his landmark book, The Descent of Man. Across the English-speaking world, men donned beards, sideburns, goatees, and mustaches, much like the 1866 Brooklyn Athletics, a stellar group of baseball amateurs. Ball players generally preferred the mustache and groomed theirs in a multitude of ways that would impress a modern-day hipster in New York or Los Angeles. One study of an illustrated British news magazine revealed something astonishing. A whopping 90% of the men pictured in the magazine had whiskers of some kind during the 1880s. Team photographs like this one of the 1886 Boston Beaneaters are typical of the era. Most players have a mustache, and they could have attitude too. The team's star pitcher, Hoss Radbourn, pictured top left, is flipping the bird. During the next decade, however, things started to change. Here is legendary pitcher Cy Young in 1891. He played for the Cleveland Spiders, and in 1895 you could see that most of his teammates preferred a clean shave. Well, before long, Cy Young joined the party, and for the next 70 years, between 1900 and 1972, ball players had short hair and clean-shaven faces in the majors, minors, and on company teams in the industrial leagues. Stop for a moment and think about the great titans from the teens and 20s. Honus Wagner, Tris Speaker, Christy Mathewson, Ty Cobb, Walter Johnson, and Babe Ruth. None of them had facial hair. And it continued on. No hair below the collar and no whiskers on the face. Why these cultural norms persisted as long as they did is worth a bit of reflection, and here are some of the factors I think are worth mentioning. First, powerful men in the 19th century had facial hair. Gilded Age moguls Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller are two examples, and the last two U.S. presidents with facial hair were Teddy Roosevelt and Howard Taft. By contrast, business moguls in the 20th century, such as Henry Ford, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk, share a lack of whiskers, something that is true for every U.S. president since 1913. Second, the period from 1917 to about 1970 witnessed large-scale military mobilizations and the overseas deployment of some 20 million American men who fought in World War I and II, Korea, and Vietnam. Those in uniform share the experience of adhering to a military standard of appearance. Third, the World Wars forged a cohort of Americans who had sacrificed collectively. What mattered in these conflicts was the group, not the individual. Fourth, baseball is conservative. Players on professional basketball teams had beards and mustaches several years before the same thing occurred in professional baseball. That takes me to the 60s. When the Beatles appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show in February of 1964, it's interesting to note that many Americans who watched the broadcast remember reacting in the same way. My goodness, those English boys have such long hair. 5 years later, countercultural trends had accelerated. The crew cut lost favor, and more Americans viewed the political establishment with suspicion. Public schools stopped enforcing conservative dress codes, and one ball player challenged the status quo. In 1972, Reggie Jackson showed up to the Oakland Athletics spring training with a mustache. Franchise owner Charlie Finley didn't like it at first, but when the slugger refused to shave, Finley decided to go a different way. He offered $300 to each player willing to grow a mustache, because the facial hair gave his team a distinctive look. Unity through hair. Well, the whiskers did not affect anyone's performance. The A's won the American League pennant 3 years in a row, and Hall of Fame pitcher Raleigh Fingers debuted his meticulously groomed handlebar mustache. Sports writers dubbed the 1972 World Series between the Oakland A's and the Cincinnati Reds the Hairs versus the Squares, because the Reds looked traditional. Well, the Hairs won the World Series, and a cultural shift swept across baseball. Hair got longer, Oscar Gamble grew his iconic afro, and sideburns re-emerged from their long repose. Not everyone liked what was happening. Yankees owner George Steinbrenner said that his players would not be permitted to grow hair past their collars or have any facial hair except for tidy mustaches. Such uniformity, the franchise insisted, contributed to team unity and discipline. Of course, players on teams with appearance policies would test the boundaries of franchise control. Rich Gossage grew a distinctive horseshoe mustache, and Oscar Gamble kept his afro for baseball cards and publicity pictures, even though he accepted Steinbrenner's rule during the regular season. By the 1980s, the mustache had settled back into baseball culture. There is, after all, a certain get-the-job-done look to an unironic mustache. And during the 1990s, several players sported a mullet with its statement: business up front, party in the back. At the turn of the 21st century, many different hairstyles existed in Major League Baseball, although one trend worth noting is the prevalence and size of beards. During the San Francisco Giants' 2010 postseason run, fans chanted "Fear the Beard" whenever closer Brian Wilson entered the game, and since then beards have gotten a lot bigger. A close shave is no longer the norm. Generally speaking, it is a time of self-expression for professional athletes. Just about any hairstyle is conceivable, and it's interesting to know that ball players' hair at the dawn of Major League Baseball is closer to our time than during the mid-20th century. I reckon Ted Williams would have had a big bushy mustache or a beard had he played in 1870 or 2010. Here are some of the sources I consulted for this video. I'm curious what comments you might have, and thanks for watching.
Mattingly, get rid of those sideburns.
What sideburns?
You heard me, hippie.